Oh, I'm live. I am live. I'm live. Look at that. Hello, everybody. I'm going to try to go live on 2 platforms and see what happens. It could be too much. It could be not enough. It could be just right. I don't know. I've never gone live on Instagram before. And maybe now is not the time to figure it out. So, oh well, I kind of don't. It doesn't matter. This is all for fun anyway, so I'm having a good time. I hope you guys are here having a good time as well. Thank you guys so much for going ahead and coming on in to join my drawing class. I've been doing this class now for a couple of weeks, and it's really been a treat for me to hear from you guys and learn what kind of questions that you've had about how to properly draw. And I've really just gotten a treat out of seeing some of the drawings that you've shared with me throughout this time. So thank you guys so much for coming and swinging by. I've got a pretty good class for us today prepared. We've been building basically the idea of, understanding shapes, using shapes to create the body. And now we're going to get into using the body, using the shapes to create the body to start to create what looks more like a living person. So if you were here last week with me, I want to just kind of do a couple of review things. But first of all, before we get started, I want to make sure that we have got our tools for success in order to have a good class. So for me, right now, I've got right here, this is just a little cup, a little plastic cup. I think this one's from Target. It's a bright fuchsia color, but you can pick any color that you like. It doesn't matter. Whatever color that you like. It can be a cup. It can be a can of beans that you've eaten before. You can take one of the lids off one of those sparkling water cans. Really anything that you want to do. The reason, though, why I have one of these is because throughout my process, I'm going to use a wooden pencil. You can use mechanical. I did have one student ask if I ever did like to use mechanical pencils, and I said, sure. Of course I do. But, with the wooden pencil, I get to do additional techniques that I wouldn't necessarily get to do with the mechanical pencil. And we'll talk a little bit about that tonight. One of those techniques is a technique that I like to use. It's called scumbling. And that's really where we turn the pencil from its point onto its side, and we're able to create actually a wider band of shading instead of just being on the point itself. So I've got my cup. I've got my pencils, so I've got just a regular old number 2. You can get this from any old grocery store that you go to. The number 2 stands for 2B. There's 2 different hardnesses to our pencils. We got the B side and the H side. B's tend to be softer, H's tend to be harder, and they also tend to draw a little bit lighter. I also have a nice colored pencil. This is a dark brown. I picked this one just kind of at random. It was closest at hand. Then, of course, I've got my pencil sharpener so that I can maintain a nice point as I'm drawing. The other thing is, so this video series is starting to evolve a little bit. And really, one of the things that I've wanted it to be able to do, my personal mission, myself, Sean, or Seanzy, as I refer to myself in this video series, my personal mission is to spread joy, a little bit of laughter, some entertainment, help people develop skills in their life. I'm in my early 30s, and I've been drawing since I was, a little 5-year-old child. And art for me has always been a lifelong joy to be able to, take it with me. I've drawn pictures on vacations. I've done it in school suspension. Believe it or not, I was not the best kid. But I've used art in different stages of my life to understand myself, understand reality, and to come up with some ideas. And because this series is more education related, I do want to raise some attention to a cause that was recently brought to my attention. I have a very dear, loved family member that I'm very close to, and she is a teacher. She's a teacher in North Texas. And she shared with me that, under this COVID circumstance and in this situation that we're currently going through, and you can see I've got my CDC approved face mask so that I can be in public. I went to the grocery store today, but There are many people in this world who are being asked to be at home for their own safety and for the safety of their families and their loved ones. And many of them are high school, junior high, and elementary school students. And that's all well and good, but based on just the rough calculations from one school, a little under 10% of one school in Irving ISD, the students do not have regular access to the internet. So I have taken it upon myself, and certainly for you guys, if you can help me out, I would appreciate it. I will post a link throughout all of my social medias for how that you can donate through a GoFundMe page to deliver hotspots. I'm only doing a small ask this time, just really as an experiment to see how it goes. But my real desire is to convert this not only as a way to share the joy of art with others, but to also raise awareness and also raise some funds, to help some of our lower income families have access to education. That way they've got some equal opportunity to the access of education, because, what we know, with excessive tardiness, excessive absenteeism, is it has certainly larger long-term consequences, not just for the individuals, but the overall intellectual capital lost to the world. I think about the joys in life that I've been able to experience from my own education. And I was publicly educated. I didn't go to a private school. I went to a school in downtown Dallas, taxpayer funded. And, I've been able to have a lot of wonderful experiences just because I have an education. And right now there are children and there are families that do not have access to the internet, and that is how information and education are being delivered to them. So I'm going to get off my soapbox. That is my ask. If you can find it within your heart to donate $5, $10, $50, $100, $1,000. My goal is $2,000 for now. If I hit that goal, I'm obviously going to raise it and try to get some more, because the more kids we can get educated, the better of a world that we can help create. And boy, I would sure be tickled pink if I could help in just a small way. And hopefully you'd come alongside me and help me along that too, because it would be our joy to do that. Okay, so let's move ahead. We're talking about posing the body, talking about using these building blocks. I'm going to go ahead and reiterate some of the things that we talked about last week. So I'm going to just draw over the drawing that I did last time. First of all, I emphasized the head, the ball of the head. I emphasized the rib cage, which is kind of an upside down heart. The spine, which goes from the top of the head and terminates into the hips. I've got a shovel shape or upside down triangle shape for the hips. And then I've got legs that Z-line out into the feet, which are triangles. And then we'll just do the other one, Z-line out into the feet, which are triangles. Then I have triangles back here, which are the shoulder blades, and they connect to the arms. And I can use the same Z-line idea to draw the hands. And it's just a nice little zigzag. Boop, 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 just like that. So couple simple shapes, guys. You don't have to go crazy when you're drawing the body. You can just use a lot of shapes. So using those basic shapes, I'm going to just show you what I've done in my free time to prepare for class. I went to a lovely site called Pinterest. Maybe y'all have heard of it. I really don't recommend it, because what will happen is you'll get on this website and you'll start clicking around, and before you know it, it's like 2 hours have gone by. You're like, oh my God, how did I wind up here? I'm in like Japan on a vacation, dream vacation, when I started looking at photo references. It's just kind of crazy how that happens. But anyway, so I took a couple of what I think are pretty basic physical references. Both of the models here depicted, and I'll certainly be adding links to the references that I use so that you can go after class to your own, as you're working on these skill sets in your own time, to see which models I picked so that you can kind of understand the flow of things. Really, my objective tonight is to do some live site drawing so that you can see kind of the process of how I'm making marks, I'm defining where I want my pencil to go. Because, over time, what you'll see is it's really just a collection of shapes, a collection of angles. There's some lighting techniques. I've started building in my different lighting volumes to create roundness. This is flat paper. You can see that because I'm touching it and it's flat, and you can understand what paper is. But with the way that I've been making marks and building volume with my mark making, now it starts to look round. So we're going to talk a little bit today about action lines, how to craft the way hips and shoulders work together. We'll talk about rotation so that we can get some body rotation. We're going to talk a little bit about light. Light is going to be really the subject that I'm going to go over next week as I start to really build out an understanding for you to see how to, how do I make light appear like it's wrapping an object, whether it be a straight object or whether it be a round object. I do have my training partner, Phil, hanging out in the background. So if you guys want to say hi to Phil, he's just going to be watching though. He's been up all night. I mean, I think he's getting catfish. He's been texting somebody from overseas. But between you and me, he's a bit of a dummy. So maybe that's just, he'll have to learn the hard way, if you know what I mean. So let's get into it. So the first part that I want to talk about is really defining the space, right? So when I'm putting a body on a page, I'm working on a concept that's called figure and ground, at least in representative art. When I think about a human being in space, let me get my references up here. When I'm thinking about a human being in space, we know where they are because they reference a horizon line. So what I'm going to do here on my page is I'm just going to draw a long line somewhere toward the bottom of the page. Hopefully my stream can see that because I'm switching between tabs and I haven't put this kind of demand on my computer. I've got I don't know, this thing is older than Moses, computer that I bought when I was still in college, and that was also some time ago. But when I think about the figure and ground situation that I'm talking about, I'm trying to get that out of full screen. Figure and ground, every object that we look at in reality has some reference to the ground. Even if it's up and we're looking at it above, we're looking at it above because we're on the ground or we're at some point in space where we're able to determine. So I've just set a horizon line here, and now I'm going to do a vertical to represent what might be a figure. Now, I will touch a little bit into perspective, and I hope that my Instagram fam can also see this. Hey guys. If you guys can't see that, just let me know. I'm going to try my best to accommodate everyone. So I've got a nice horizon line here, and now that's going to be my ground. That's going to be my reference point for the body that I'm going to build. And then I've got the figure. So just like I showed earlier where I've got the head, the ribs, the hips, and whatnot, that's going to give me an idea of where this person is, like how tall they are, what kind of movement they're doing, all kinds of different situations like that. Those are kind of wonky legs. Maybe they're walking. I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's all for fun anyway. So that's kind of the first idea that I want to make sure that I cover when I'm drawing the body and representing the body in space. Figure and ground. I'm going to just go ahead and draw a perspective line. So right now, this person is, so this is the point of my focus, this dot out here. And I'm making a triangle because as I think about the way my eye sees, our eyes see at a point. And wherever that point is, I'm going to just kind of look at you both here. Wherever that point is, that is where the cone of reality begins to shape. When we think about some of the metaphors that we use, where we see roundness, A lot of that begins and originates, and then we start to see this wheel of things that come out. And without getting too abstract, that's basically what the eye begins to see. It's a focus and then a radiation from that focus point of different objects. That's how we'll be able to get scale. So I have already defined a person here. I'm going to make a person the same height simply by reducing down the proportions. So notice I can take my lines basically through. I touched on this a little bit last week in terms of keeping my constants. But if I'm not getting too confusing with my line work, I can really begin to represent the same sized person at different distances away from me. Now, different things like head scale are going to come in importance because the eye will be able to detect those dissimilarities. But already you can see just in a loose drawing, I'm able to really draw the same shape and create a stack of them through space where the nearest one is biggest and the farthest one is smallest. And that's how I really begin to interact with my figure and my ground, is one, using perspective, using distance, using size. I want to make sure that I've got that scale pretty consistently throughout. So that's one of the first reasons why, even though later on I'm going to draw the figure, I'm not going to represent the ground per se. I'll use that as a reference point if I'm building around an arena around the body to reference it. Because otherwise, if it's just a drawing of a person, it's going to be relatively meaningless unless there's a little bit of action that's going along with it too. So I'm using my tools for success. I've already started to wear down this colored pencil here. So I've got my cup, and my cup is catching my pencil shavings so they don't go all over my apartment floor, because that would mean that I would have to sweep, and then I would have to mop, and then that is just more than I want to get into in a Tuesday night. Okay, so first idea, figure, ground. If you have any questions, please leave me a comment. I do have the chat function set up on both Instagram and YouTube. If you have anything that you want me to recover from here, great. Otherwise, I'm going to move on, and I'm going to start thinking about how to build light on a shape, okay? And I'm going to use the same kind of basic idea as I move on to my next page. Now, if you are following at home, I do definitely recommend that you start making the same general shapes that I do. Don't worry about it being perfect. This is, we're kind of going on the fly here, and you can certainly take these tools and refine them at home. That's what this is all about. This is about the joy of art, not the strictures of trying to make something beautiful right away. If we're walking, when you see a baby learn how to walk, it's going to fall, and it's going to trip, and it's not going to have a beautiful, elegant stride. It takes time. And just like what we're doing with our art, it's going to take time for us as well. So I'm going to take one of my favorite shapes, which is the ball, and I'm going to represent that with a circle. Same idea though, figure, ground. Now I've got a ground, and it's already starting to look like this ball. Can you guys even see that on Instagram? I don't know, man. I might have to get a bolder marker. Well, then that's what you get. Tune into my YouTube channel, and you'll be able to see a little bit better. What do you think about that? Haha. Okay, so I've already got my figure and my ground. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just indicate on this ball where the light is going to hit. Okay, so I'm going to draw a little dot there. For the case of this exercise, I'm going to go a little bit heavier, just so that you've got enough contrast to see it from home, so that you can kind of understand what I'm doing. Now, what I'm going to do, excuse me, I had a canned water, so a little bit of that gas is coming up. Oh boy, I like the, I don't know about you guys, but I like the orange flavor. I like the citrusy flavors. I like the the grapefruit. That's one of my favorite ones. Pamplemousse is what the LaCroix people call it, but I call it grapefruit because I get the HEB store brand. Okay, so light. Light approaches objects here, and I've got a nice arrow pointing at, basically representing the photon of light hitting this ball. And as the light hits the ball, it's going to hit the nearest point to it. That is also going to be the hottest point or the widest point on the ball. When I use the term hot, I'm referring to the Kelvin scale. Kelvin is temperature scale. Depending on how sophisticated I decide to get with this video series, I will begin to explain color theory, less in terms of pigmentation, like your typical color wheel, and explain it more in the way that I learned it under a master portrait painter, which is using Kelvin scale or temperature. And basically what that means is heat versus cold, warm colors versus cool colors. All right, I digress. So I'm imagining that the light is hitting this ball right here at this focus. And then as light does, it's going to scatter and envelop that shape. So I'm going to now draw lines to represent this light going all the way around the ball. And already it's beginning to look like it's got more roundness, You might even say, if you want to get real clever, it kind of looks like an orange, you know, because I've got the layers, the longitudinal lines coming from that focus point. Now I'm going to add latitudinal lines as an additional reference point so that I can start to see the round shape. I had you guys do this last class as we started adding volume lines around the curve of the thighs and of the body of the figures that we drew. But today I'm going to do it a little bit more focused to show you what I mean as it goes around. So just like I drew this circle here to represent where the light is hitting, I'm going to start doing more circles, but the focus of my circles is going to be that same point. That's what's going to help me keep the consistency of my shape. So almost like I've got a compass, which is one of those things, and sorry about the armpit view. Unless you're into armpits, you know, then hey, what's up? But what I'm going to start doing is draw that circle around using that same focus point so that my circles stay consistent. That's how I'm going to find that circle point. So I can even start here. If I want, I can use a finger reference point and making sure that I'm keeping it consistent, bring it around. I'm steering from my elbow to lift it up and around. But notice I was able to keep a relatively consistent circle, and that's going to add dimension, okay? I'm using line to create dimension. Okay, so now let's talk about, there are actually, when I look at a round object in a black and white situation, there's actually 6 stages of light. And I'm going to write them down. I write in cursive. I was publicly educated in a time, you know, I know that I asked earlier for you guys to help support these Gen Z kids who don't know cursive, and that's okay. It's a shame, actually. I could talk about the hand-brain link and how we are denying them the ability to learn better. But, you know, I can only have so many soapboxes because you guys will stop watching, and I don't want to do that. So I've got my highlight, which is that hot point that I've already talked about. Highlight, H-I-G-H-L-I-G-H-T. I've got my highlight. That's the hottest point. If you see my nose, the highlight is that right there. You see that little white bump there? There's a white bump there. There's a little white bump there. White bump there. It's the hottest or the nearest point of my round object to, and round meaning 3-dimensional. You know, a round object could be a cylinder, in which case the front of that cylinder is going to be the nearest. You can see the whiteness change. See how the point of light is getting closer and closer. for the Instagram folks, the point of light is getting closer and closer. And so where the concentrated light is hitting is moving over the object. That's going to be my widest point, and then light is going to begin to scatter around the shape. So I've got my highlight. That's my highest point, my nearest point to the shape. Then I've got my light. It's the next place, you know, so highlight and then light, highlight and then light. That's as the light begins to scatter. It's actually, we are all in darkness. That's one way that you can think about it. We are all in, like, this is like, get your emo stuff out, man. Start listening to The Cure. We're all in darkness, man. But no, so seriously, we are all in darkness, and it is actually light which illuminates and gives our ability to see. The natural state of nature is darkness, and light is the unnatural thing. And then our eyes are the receptors that pick up the light waves bouncing from the three-dimensional objects. Science. Okay, so we've got light, highlight, light. Then we get into shadow. Then we get into core shadow, which is essentially the opposite idea. And I'll type this out so that you guys, yeah, man, go to school. Yeah, that's right, AJ. 2 love texts on the house. What up, man? Art is like, what I love about it is it's trained me to see the world in such a phenomenal way, and I'm trying to share that with you guys. So think about highlight. That's the point that's nearest to the object, and shadow is the part where the volume is farthest away from the object. So in this instance, I'm kind of pointing to my jawline. I've got some shadow building here, but it's actually not the darkest place that I see. So the darkest place is the core shadow. So round, 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 shadow, shadow, shadow. Then it gets into the core shadow. And then you actually kind of wind up getting into shadow again, but I'm going to write it a little bit lighter because what you begin to see there is something that's called reflected light. Reflected light. I've got 1 stage, 2 stage, 3 stage, 4 stage, 5 stage. So just like this ball is receiving light, this surface is also receiving light. And light has a funny property in that it bounces off of things. So light is bouncing all these different directions. But there's really no reference point for you to see here, and it doesn't really matter. So why the heck would you draw something that you're not looking at? But in reality, light is bouncing off of this ground back onto the ball. So you'll often wind up seeing a lighter side to the ball on the back side of it. And that's what gives it additional roundness. Now, I don't have a surface behind my face, but if I did, and if my camera was like super good, you know, because like I said, this thing's like 10 years old, this camera. So, you know, kudos to Apple, guys, way to go for a 10-year-old camera that's still looking dope enough for me to at least make this class. Oh, and I see Bob Lemons. What's up, Bob? How are you, sir? Man, this is great. I love this. Okay. I've got reflected light, and then this is what most people see because this is what most people think about. Then we get into the cast shadow, right? And then the cast shadow is really the shape of the object as the light interacts it, you know, because that whole object is blocking all of the light. And so that's where we see, you know, this kind of thing. And in art, you know, the fun thing about shadows is they're not like, they're so ephemeral that you can really be super wrong when you're drawing a shadow. And as long as you've got the other parts that are relatively convincing, you know, your shadow is going to come out just fine. Now, there's ways that light can start to interfere with shadow, and we'll get into that. That's more of an advanced concept. But right now, what I really want us to focus about is building that light around the object, seeing it basically drip or wrap itself around the object as the waves begin to explore its shape. That's what we're doing when we're drawing, is we're exploring how that object is coming forward and how it's coming back to us, the viewer. So I'm going to put some marks down on the page just to begin to build volume. So just like I'm using that same center point to draw the circles, I think it's going to be much more convincing for me, the way that I like to make art, if I keep my lines more like following that same idea. So I'm going to start drawing lines that are focused on the center of the ball, right? And this is we're gonna be here for some time because we're gonna build out this shape a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And we're gonna get to a point where we've got some real dimensioning here. Now, I have in this part, as I do some smaller lines, toward the ball, I'm really kind of illustrating what my light is. And then as I move away from the highlight, my lines are getting denser and closer together to represent more the shadow. So what I'm really kind of doing here is creating the different steps. I'm kind of doing flat tone right now. And then from my flat tone, where everything is pretty much the same, I'm going to use that to build and build and build and build. So I'm already kind of re-going over my same territory. If anybody has some good songs that I can like hum or sing to myself, go ahead and leave a comment. Let me know. Let me know what that music worms that's been creeping through your brain is. I've been listening to this band called Vulfpeck, Vulfpeck. Very, very talented group of musicians. I think that there's a piano player in there who must be like some sort of genetic material from J.S. Bach or something. I don't know. I mean, this guy can tickle some black and whites and some keys. Like he was born to do it. It's like he came out of the womb doing this stuff. Okay, so I've got already represented on my ball. Now notice I'm doing a little bit of reflected light. Reflected light is not as strong, say, as light. Because it's already one step removed from pure light. And that pure light is that highlight and light. So it's the light and then it's the reflected light, okay? So it should really be moved up here underneath light in terms of its darkness, right? So if I think about, a spectrum of darkness here like this, it really is kind of in the middle somewhere. Here, the reflected light, but just as I'm explaining wrapping the shape of the ball, I want you to be able to see where it's coming from. And so I am approaching it a little bit lighter as I build it out. I don't want to have a huge reflected light, at least in this example, because I think it'll get a little bit confusing. Okay, but I've got a nice, basically, shadow here. Normally, if I was drawing this, I would not highlight or circle that highlight point because I don't want there to be any sort of visual information there. Our light on the paper when we're drawing needs to be the actual native paper if we're going to use white paper. If we're going to use toned paper, which you can get paper in all colors. Construction paper is a good example of that. Red, blue, green, white, yellow. Well, white, yeah, okay, whatever. You can use pigmented tools to create white and add your white. But in terms of using like a sketchbook or drawing pencil paper, things like that. What's up, Mark? How are you, buddy? In terms of using a sketchbook, I want to make sure that I'm keeping the white of the page there. So in this example, I did do that. So I've got my highlight, which is that circle there. Then I've got my light starting to, and I've got thin, sparse lines coming around. Then I'm getting into my shadow, right? And so my shadow is starting to build. Now I'm going to get into my core shadow, and I'm going to start adding darker pigmentation. Into this object. Still trying to keep that same circle idea though, right? Because I'm drawing a ball and I am using that highlight point as my reference point for me to see how light is coming over that object. And then as it comes around, it's going to lighten up. I'm being a little bit more dramatic in my toning here. I want you to be thinking about when you're working at home on this, that you're really being very precise with how those lights and darks are coming out, because those darks are really going to define what you see. One of the things that I said in one of my earlier videos is that the eye started as a tool to see the difference between light and dark. Not much, Mark. How you doing, brother? Good to see you, man. Thank you for being in class today. So you can already see just in those quick mark makings, and I don't think that I was doing anything that anybody else couldn't do at home. Just in those mark makings, I've been able to really create a lot of volume on my shape, which is pretty nice. Okay. And I think anybody can do that at home. I got my tools for success. For those of y'all who are wondering, I wasn't just paying extra attention to my lap. I was sharpening a pencil, as the pencil shavings indicate. All right. So now let's get into the cast shadow. More or less, the cast shadow is going to be flat. If you were to look at, because the light is being interrupted more or less even levels all the way. It depends on some of the other dynamics. Sometimes you might see some additional body of the shadow here, like directly into the object. This is going to be more determined by what else is around the object. I'm going to try to eliminate as much of that white space around. And realistically, I don't want to do a hard line to define my shadow in the future, because that's the shadows don't actually do that. When you actually look at a shadow, shadows begin to dissipate. So if I was going to draw a shadow, I would actually start to lighten the edge a little bit. Like, so if I'm going to predefine a shadow like I did earlier, I would actually start to lighten the edges just a teens so that they begin to break apart. And I simulate that idea that, light is not stable, dark is stable. So like I said, listen to The Cure, and that'll put you, hey, Virginia, what's up? All right. This is great, man. I'm so excited you guys are here joining me on this. I love this. Okay, so let's recap this just so that I can have an understanding of volume and as light shapes around a curve. So I started with my ball. I defined my highlight point, and that can be anywhere, right? I just arbitrarily picked this point. My light can be here. That's going to give me long shadows. So here's kind of an interesting concept that's going to be difficult for me to demonstrate in class right now because all my lighting is overhead. But if light is approaching from overhead, your shadows, just like at high noon, your shadows are going to be very small, concentrated under the object. The lower that light reference gets to the object, the longer the shadow is going to be. Now, sometimes if the light is underneath the object, you're not going to really get a strong cast shadow. Realistically, the object is blocking the light waves from being able to move through the object, but not always necessarily will you be able to get a cast shadow from that. You'll tend to see that kind of effect if you're looking for that kind of effect on horror movies. Yo, what's up, Crash? What's up, man? John in the house. How are you, brother? Sweet. Okay. So you'll tend to see that effect in horror movies where light is coming up into an object to define its underside. And you won't really tend to see a cast shadow from that. Or if you do, you might see some cartoons where it's like, you've got the alleyway situation and, the little mouse has got the light shooting up. And because of that, the shadow is expanded huge. And so he's, stomping through the alleyway and starting to get like really intimidating to the cat that's chasing it. Like, oh, there's going to be a big thing, like better run away. And so that's using light to tell stories as well. But in this instance, I'm drawing really the light coming in from overhead, and then, representing the light wrapping around the object. So this is, a little detour. I didn't mean to spend this much time on it, but this is definitely good information. I'm going to build, my concept or thought process for next week is to build more on this concept, using light to build objects, or using dark really to build objects. When I'm working in pigmented processes like dry media, like colored pencils, it's a lot easier for me to work into the darks rather than it is to work into the lights. When I've got oil paints or acrylic paints, it's easier for me to work from dark into the lights to represent volume that way. So it's just a different way to approach it. But right now, the focus for me on the class is to teach you how to draw with things that you already have. Depending on what kind of feedback I get, and please, you're all welcome to leave me comments, give me some pointers on things. If there's specific topics or subjects or subject matter that you want to learn, then I'll certainly get into that and address those concerns or questions. Likewise, you guys have some nasty negative space concepts down the line. Heck yeah, I'll write that down. Negative space. Negative space is the place. Space is the place. Okay. So now I'm going to get into what I really wanted this class to be all about. And that was representing the body in space, in motion. So I've got, like I showed earlier, I've got a couple of references. And RJ, actually, I'm going to show you this reference because I think that this one is for you as I was doodling it to think about the line dynamics. And actually, why don't I analyze this drawing right here? So this is a nice action pose. For those of you at home who have eyes that can see, basically what I've got is I've got what appears to me to be a woman in a Muay Thai knee striking stance. Those of you who know me know that I love martial arts. I love training stand-up, and I love training on the ground. And so I'm always naturally attracted to combat actions, but also just because they tend to provide a lot of visual stimulation, a lot of information. Her head is off balance because her weight is being counterbalanced by her knee coming forward. So even though relative to her hip line, her head is back, and I've already started to demonstrate that with my basic action line. I'll re-emphasize it here for the camera. I've already started to demonstrate that with the action line to show, like, okay, the weight of her body is back here, but I'm also referencing where that weight is coming into place with her head and how her arms and how that other counterweight is really keeping her, yeah, dude, yeah, you like that. Keeping her stable as an object, keeping her stable as a human being. Not to say that it's wrong, and certainly there are plenty of drawings and photographs of people in unstable positions, but it depends on what you're doing, and certainly those those less stable positions are going to be difficult to begin understanding drawing with. I want to begin drawing with stability and then go from there. So just like, when you learn martial arts, you learn the basic positions first, and then you start to learn how to go from position A to position B, and then you learn what feeds into A and B. So for this particular drawing, and actually that was not the reference that I pulled up, but RJ, I'm glad that you are here, my guy, because I'm going to re-reference that, and I will post her from Pinterest. Yes, I have a Pinterest account. No, you cannot follow me. Actually, you can. I don't care. I don't really have preferences for that. I don't remember which one I saved it into because I have a lot of boards. And there we go. Anatomy and poses. Apparently, I've got 98 followers in that, so I have no idea what that means. Maybe I have been leaving money on the table and I didn't even know it. So where is my Muay Thai gal? Maybe I did not save that photo reference. Well, shame on me, shucky darn. Okay, well, I'll find it again, but I'm gonna be mindful of my time. So there's a couple of things that I wanna point out in this position. So first of all, when I started drawing this, I started by defining the overall action line and exploring where her body was going in space. For those of y'all who can't see, basically what I'm doing is starting with the feet and then exploring really what that shape is that she's actually making. Then I'm kind of countering that shape with my basic shapes. And I'm really just building a skeleton that makes zero sense if I don't actually get further into it. And for those of you on the Instagram, sorry that the uplighting is causing the light to be really hot. But you can see, so you both can see, I'm exploring the overall shape of the body that it's doing, and then starting to counterweight it by using my basic shape. So I've got the sphere for the buttocks and the sphere of the knee. I would then go down and make like a triangle shape here to connect these things. And so that way I can already begin structurally to have it down what I'm trying to draw. The rest just kind of becomes cake on top of that. So, if I'm drawing the hips and the legs, well, I've already shown you how to draw hips and legs. They're basically cones. I can do the femur here. If you're using the zigzag technique, you can do the zigzag technique. I've shown you a couple of different ways that you can reference this. This one's going to be a little bit more confusing with the zigzag just because I've got to come back in with the triangle. But that will also explain how to create, that bend in the body, because the body is going to bend over itself like this, and you'll create interesting anatomical lines simply by tracking how the body is doing. So there's many different ways that you can actually build the shape, build the body. I'm coming into my last 12 minutes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as an opportunity to start the drawing that I had in mind originally, which also disappeared. So, hey, this is the fun part of being live, guys, is that you got to be on your toes. Head, shoulders, knees, and toes, as I like to say. So I got my non-iMac keyboard. And then what am I going to say? Let me see. I got on Pinterest, and boy, oh boy, here's my secret. Action pose. It's super easy, guys. Dude, Pinterest is great. Yes, sir, it is. Yes, sir, it is. So I'm going to pick what I think is a relatively easy action pose. Not because I am wanting to, or I'm intimidated by the pose. I'm really not. I want to make sure that I'm providing references for you guys at this point, so that if you do decide to draw this photo, that no, I don't want to go to the website. I just want to use the reference. I'm sorry, I don't know. No. Can I see it bigger? Maybe if I go. Okay. Yes. Okay. So there we go. So I'm going to move to a clean white sheet of paper, and I'm going to just show you guys how I'm exploring and how I'm using my lines to build this shape, right? So I'm back to my negative space note, and I'll use negative space, RJ, just as a way to demonstrate what I mean. That's going to be more of a design concept, or at least what I think you're asking about is more of a design concept than a volumetric principle, but let's just see. Okay, so ground. So I started the class off with ground. Now I'm going to hold my pencil a little bit loose. Orthodox way, the way that you learn how to hold a pencil is like that. When I'm drawing, I want to have a little bit more freedom, and I also want to take away my ability to use my wrist too much. I want to be able to explore. So I'm going to do the head. I like to just do a solid line for the face, and I'm going to just do the head here. I'm going to then plant the foot, what I'm doing, and then I'm exploring where the body part is. If you can see this at home, great. If you can't, I'm sorry. I'll post a link to my drawing, and I'll post a link to what I'm doing. So from here, from the hip, I'm doing a triangle for the chest and starting to build up the arms. And boop, 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 boop. And I'm starting to add volume to my shapes. There we go. And knees into the legs and calves. Now, I'm being bad. What you should be doing as you're referencing is drawing back and forth from your reference to your page to make sure that you're tracking back and forth with what it is that you're doing. So if it looks like I'm looking at a tennis game because my head is bouncing back and forth, well, then that means I'm actually properly referencing my reference material. So if you're already looking at home, you can see that what I did is I started with my basic shapes, and now I'm starting to build dimension with my other techniques. So I'm going to use some of my same techniques just so that you can see how I'm implementing them into my drawings. And I'm going really fast because I've only got a few more minutes. And I want to keep it fast because I don't want to belabor too much what I'm doing with my drawing. I want to focus more on the person, on the body of what I'm building rather than the specific details. That's going to come for a later stage. So hopefully you can already start to see, and I'm going to change the hand here. Boop. I'm going to make the foot here like that. And there we go. Actually, the foot angle is backward, more like that, because this guy's getting a nice yoga stretch. This guy's got incredible balance, or at least for the photograph, he got it long enough for them to snap a photo, which is generally pretty instantaneous. You know, since, I don't know, 1920 or something, we figured out what it needs to take instant photography. So that's kind of cool. All right, boop. So already I'm adding twist. So I added twist earlier by starting from the outside leg. So I'll just exaggerate this line here so that you can understand how I was able to create that. I'm creating twist from that far hip and moving it to open up the chest, right? And then because I'm representing a torso, you know, I showed you guys drawing the rectangular torso. And so that when I fold it or rotate it, I'll start to get triangles, and that will show me, you know, how the face is. Normally it's more like a, you know, I hope that makes sense, rectangular prism. So this guy's got some hair, and he's got a little top knot, definitely a millennial. One, because it's a man doing yoga, and two, because he's got a top knot. Not to say that men didn't do yoga, but that's definitely more of a millennial thing that came around recently. And by recently, I mean like the last 10 to 15 years. And really, I'm just talking to talk, hear myself talk. And I got some shorts, boop. And I'm not using super specific lines, and neither do you as you draw the body. Specific lines come later. So I'm just, hopefully you guys are already starting to see how I've built this guy out using some real basic line structure. And then I'll post the reference link in my show notes so that you can draw this wonderful guy doing a cool yoga pose yourself as well, and have fun with it. So this has been done in a little under 5 minutes here. Let's see, redo that hand here. This hand was tough. I started wrong on this hand, so I've had to remake it a couple of times. But that's another reason why I've got the, hey RJ, thanks for coming, brother. So that's one of the reasons why I keep one of my tools for success, which is this eraser. So if I do something that I don't like, I can just get rid of it. It's done. I'm keeping my feet as triangles because that's pretty much what they are. And now it looks pretty much like I've got a dude holding onto his toe, doing one of those, he's twisting backwards and reaching behind him. Just like I showed last time, the hand is just a shovel. So you can just draw a shovel shape. Hope you guys can see that on Instagram. I'm going to figure out my Instagram lighting. This is my first time going live on Instagram, so thank you guys for joining. But I will troubleshoot a little bit better for you guys because I want you to be able to see. I want to be able to share the joy of drawing with everybody. So yeah, this is putting the body into some roundness. Now, if I want to think about where the light is coming from, so this may not have been the best example in terms of lighting because this appears to be a professional studio shot. So light is approaching from all angles. That's okay though, because what that really means is that my darkest points are in the meatiest part of his body, so that when I start adding light, the light is going to come from these outside points. So there we go. I'm just going to do that. So there we go. I'm actually going to go ahead and come to an ending point because we're coming up on an hour. Does anybody have any questions for me? Does anybody have any questions, comments, anything that they want me to recover or go over again before I wrap the video? Stephen, good to see you, brother. Thank you for that. I appreciate it, my guy. And so, yeah, real easy. Head, so I started off by laying my ground so that I could see how my guy is relative into space. Then I defined, roughly where he's standing to that. I threw a foot down, threw a head down. When I drew the face, I just drew a straight line to represent the outside of the space, and then a jawline to terminate. And notice, I don't care. I went beyond, so what? This is a sketch. This is to get the position down. I can always erase that and then refine, and then refine, and then refine, and then refine. So there we go, guys. That is the lesson that I had in mind for today. I got some great feedback already from you beautiful, wonderful people. So do I tend to focus on the dark spaces at the start? That's a good question. So how I am looking at the object. So if I'm drawing a person, I want to look at the pose first and then build the light volume around them. If I'm using the person to tell a story, then I want to think about the modeling and the reference point of where they are in the space. So the best way that I can think about that is in crime noir things. If you want, when I grew up, I was never really super into comic books, believe it or not. I liked them. I liked certain ones. I was particularly a big fan of Todd McFarlane's Spawn because, golly, that guy still is one of the best artists to have ever lived. But you know, if you think about the noir genre, like I'm covering my eyes, and so I'm able to tell a story with how the light is coming over me as an object. And so like that's great. But if I'm just trying to get the body down first, I want to make sure that I'm representing my action first, because the read of the body, like, you know, we could get into some science here and talk about evolution a little bit, or at least the way that the brain perceives. One of the reasons why we have not completely blacked out eyes is so that we can see where other people are looking. That's very important for how we signal to each other. But one of the like earliest shapes that human beings learn is the shape of another human being. And so from a distance, it doesn't matter if you're near or far. You can pretty much, like, if someone's like 200 yards away, you can basically make that, well, my live video ended. So bummer, but that's okay. So there's always the YouTube. So basically, let me just answer the question here. If you are, you know, looking 200 yards away, you can see that human body. You know what it is that you're looking at. Whereas if you're just focusing on how the light is going over the object, you're not going to get as much impact, because the read, you're going to cancel out what you're actually trying to show, because the anatomy isn't making sense to the eye. So thank you guys for a lovely class. I am going to post the link to the GoFundMe. I really would love to see some help and some participation so that we can get students, you know, and it doesn't have to be through me. You know, if you know a student in your personal life who needs a hotspot, great. I know that many of the telecom companies are providing certain relief to families, low-income families. But really, my mission is to spread joy through art over the internet, and I cannot spread joy to people who don't even have access to the internet. So thank you guys for your participation. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your love and support. Please share this class so that I can help more people. And you know, I'll see you on Thursday, where we'll go more into these kind of examples. We'll get into what's called foreshortening, to represent the body coming near us and going farther away from us and whatnot. So much love to you guys. Have a great night. Thank you for drawing together with Seanzy. All right, have a good night.